The silent call. The Lumeri never meant to call for help. Their species had evolved on the crystalline world of Eridus, where light fractured through towering spires of translucent mineral formations, and communication happened through subtle color changes in their iridescent skin. They were philosophers, artists, and cultivators, their bodies capable of absorbing nutrients directly from their planet's unique radiation spectrum. They had no concept of war. When the Vexari ships first appeared in their skies, the Lumari thought they were witnessing a cosmic event. The massive vessels hovered above their crystal cities, blocking the light that was their lifeblood. The Lumari gathered in their forums, skin flickering with confusion patterns, debating what these new shadows could mean. They weren't prepared when the harvesting began. Vexari dropships descended on Eridus' surface, disgorging armored figures who moved with mechanical precision. They weren't interested in communication. The Lumari's peaceful overtures, their bodies glowing with greeting patterns, were met with capture nets and containment fields. The Vexari needed resources, and the Lumari's crystalline biology was rich with rare elements that powered their empire's technology. In the chaos, an ancient Lumari scientist named Sorel made a desperate choice. Centuries before, during Eridus' early astronomical explorations, they had built a simple radio transmitter, technology they had long abandoned as they developed their own light-based communication methods. Sorel activated this forgotten device, not because they expected anyone to hear, but because they needed to do something, anything, as their world was being stripped away. The message was simple: pulses of energy, a mathematical sequence that couldn't be random noise, a deliberate signal in a frequency band so old that most advanced civilizations had stopped monitoring it millennia ago. We exist. We suffer. Help. The signal rippled outward, passing through the void for 18 days before it encountered an unlikely receptor, Mining Station Delta 7, a human outpost on the fringes of settled space. Communications officer Maya Chen was pulling a double shift when her console pinged. Most of her colleagues would have dismissed it as background noise, cosmic radiation, equipment malfunction, or one of the countless random emissions that filled the silence between stars. But Maya had always been fascinated by SETI history, the early human search for extraterrestrial intelligence. She recognized the pattern immediately. "Captain," she called, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I think someone's calling for help." Captain Alejandro Reyes had seen everything in his 30 years in space. He'd weathered solar flares that melted communication arrays, negotiated with corporate raiders, and once spent 6 months trapped in a mining pod with only a faulty AI for company. But he'd never encountered a genuine alien distress call. "Send it to Earth Command," he said after reviewing the signal, "and keep monitoring. If someone's in trouble out there, they should know humans are listening." The message reached Earth Command 12 hours later. Unlike the bureaucratic delays that characterized most of human history, the response was immediate. Humanity had learned through its own painful past, wars, climate disasters, near-extinction events, that hesitation in the face of suffering only multiplied the cost. Admiral Kaido Nakamura assembled the Emergency Response Council within the hour. Representatives from every major Earth nation and colony participated via neural link. "We've confirmed it's not a natural phenomenon," the analysis team reported. "The signal carries mathematical constants that couldn't occur randomly. It originated from the Eridus system, which our long-range scans show is experiencing unusual energy fluctuations consistent with large-scale industrial activity." "Do we have visuals?" asked the representative from the Mars colonies. "Limited, but what we can see doesn't look like natural development. Something's happening on that planet that wasn't happening 6 months ago." Admiral Nakamura stood, his weathered face illuminated by the holographic display. "Humanity has debated for centuries what our first contact with alien intelligence would be like. We imagined cultural exchanges, scientific collaboration, perhaps even cautious diplomacy." He gestured to the pulsing signal visualization. "Instead, we've received a cry for help." The room fell silent. Our ancestors once sent ships across oceans because they heard distress calls on primitive radios, Nakamura continued. They didn't ask if the survivors shared their language, culture, or even their species. They went because when someone calls for help, you answer. The decision was unanimous. Within 48 hours, the Rapid Response Fleet was mobilized. 5 warships that had been designed after the Proxima Centauri Civil War, vessels built not for conquest, but for intervention. Their hulls were painted with Earth's new emblem, a blue sphere with a white hand, palm outward, the universal symbol for peace, the option always offered first. But the ships also carried something else, something that reflected humanity's dual nature. Deep in their armored cores, they housed the most advanced weapons systems ever developed, innovations born from millennia of human conflict. Because Earth had learned another lesson from its blood-soaked history, sometimes peace must be enforced. Captain Eliza Warren stood on the bridge of the ERS Thunderhead, watching her crew prepare for their first faster-than-light jump toward Eridus. At 43, she had never expected to lead humanity's first contact mission. She had joined the Rapid Response Fleet because she believed in protection, in standing between the innocent and those who would harm them. All ships report ready, Captain, her XO announced. Warren nodded, her eyes fixed on the view screen showing the fleet formation. Send a message to Earth Command. The Thunderhead acknowledges the mission and will proceed to Eridus system. We hear the call. We are answering. The 5 ships vanished into the fold of space, carrying with them humanity's capacity for both compassion and terrible violence. And as they accelerated toward an unknown confrontation, they had no way of knowing they were about to announce humanity's presence to a galaxy that had forgotten what it meant to care about the suffering of strangers. By the time the human fleet dropped out of FTL at the edge of the Eridus system, the situation had deteriorated beyond their worst predictions. Long-range scans revealed dozens of Vexari vessels in orbit around the crystalline planet, massive harvesters deployed across its surface. The Lumari weren't just being invaded, they were being systematically extracted. They're treating the planet like a mine, Tactical Officer Liu whispered, horror evident in her voice as the sensor readings clarified. Those aren't colonies they're building, they're processing plants. Warren studied the holographic display, her mind racing through protocols and possibilities. Humanity had prepared for first contact scenarios, but always with the assumption that they would be the ones initiating contact. Now they were about to introduce themselves by intervening in a planetary-scale atrocity. Open a channel to the largest vessel, she ordered. All frequencies, all known communication protocols, and prepare defensive systems, but do not power weapons unless authorized. The communications officer worked frantically, sending the carefully crafted first contact message package. Mathematical sequences, simple visual representations, peace indicators in multiple formats. Captain, we're receiving a response, the comms officer reported, surprise evident in his voice. They're using standard radio waves, simple binary encoding. The message appeared on the main screen, translated through the ship's eye. Unidentified vessels. This territory belongs to the VEXARITSUONSORTIUM. Depart immediately or be classified as resource material. Warren's jaw tightened. Send again. Explain we've detected signs of distress from the planet's inhabitants and request immediate cessation of all harvesting activities. The response came faster this time. Native organisms classified as resource material. Harvesting proceeds according to CONSORTIUM protoxiolas. A final warning. DEPART, or Joint Resource Inventory. Throughout the bridge, the crew exchanged glances. This wasn't a cultural misunderstanding or a diplomatic misstep. The Vexari understood perfectly. They simply didn't care. Captain, Lieutenant Commander Okafor said quietly from the science station, I'm detecting life signs on the planet's surface. They're diminishing rapidly. Warren closed her eyes briefly. thinking of all the peaceful first contact scenarios humanity had envisioned. None had prepared them for this moment, finding themselves witnesses to an atrocity with the power to intervene, but no roadmap for what came after. She opened her eyes. Signal the fleet. Deploy in defensive formation around the planet. Launch communication probes to the surface. Let's see if we can establish contact with the natives. Captain, her XO warned, that will be seen as direct interference. Yes, Warren said, her voice firm. It will. As the human fleet moved into position, the Vexeri ships began to respond, breaking from their harvesting patterns to form their own battle lines. They clearly hadn't expected resistance. Not here, not from unknown vessels that had appeared from nowhere. The probes launched toward Eridus's surface, streaking through the atmosphere as the two fleets faced each other in the blackness of space. On the planet below, Sorel watched the new lights appear in the sky through the cracked dome of what had once been a learning center. The Lumari scientist had survived by hiding in the crystalline caves, watching as their people were harvested in the thousands. Their skin had dimmed to nearly black, the Lumari equivalent of deep mourning. When the small object landed nearby, Sorel approached cautiously. It unfurled like a flower, projecting lights in patterns that stirred something deep in the Lumari's ancestral memory. Not the harsh, consuming light of the Vexori harvesters, but something else, a rhythm like the pulses Sorel had sent into space in that moment of desperation. A response. As Sorel's skin began to flicker with cautious hope patterns above them in space, humanity prepared to make its first impression on the wider galaxy, not with words of peace, but with the thunder of defiance against cruelty. The choice had been made when the first harvester ship turned its weapons toward the human fleet. Captain Warren gave the order that would change everything. Shields up. Weapons online. Show them what it means when humans answer a call for help. Thunder's echo. The first Vexori blast struck the EOS Thunderhead's forward shields, the energy dispersing in a brilliant flash against the barrier. For a moment, silence hung on the bridge, the collective breath of humanity's representatives held in the face of this irrevocable moment. Return fire, Captain Warren ordered, her voice steady. Targeted strikes only. Disable their weapons systems and engines. Humanity's response wasn't the blind rage of vengeance, but the calculated precision of protectors. The Thunderhead's main cannons fired, not at the Vexeri command ship, but at the vessels actively deploying harvesters to the planet's surface. The energy beams cut through space, striking with surgical accuracy that surprised even the human tactical officers. On the planet below, the Lumari watched as new lights flashed in their darkened sky. Not the dull red of the Vexeri ships, but brilliant blues and whites that danced between the stars. Sorel stood before the human probe, their skin flickering rapidly with patterns that the device recorded and transmitted back to the fleet. They're communicating, Lieutenant Zhang announced on the Thunderhead's bridge. The AI is processing the light patterns. It appears to be their natural language. But there was no time for deeper communication. The Vexeri had recovered from their initial surprise and now brought their full arsenal to bear. Their ships, built for industrial harvesting rather than warfare, were nevertheless equipped with formidable defensive capabilities. Multiple incoming, Tactical Officer Liu warned. They're targeting our engines. The human fleet's formation shifted with practiced precision, the 5 ships moving in complex patterns that confused the Vexeri targeting systems. This wasn't luck or desperate evasion. It was the product of centuries of human conflict, strategies refined through countless wars before humanity had finally learned to direct its protective instincts outward rather than against itself. Captain, communications reported, we're receiving transmissions from the surface. The probe's translation matrix is adapting to their language patterns. They're giving us targeting coordinates for the primary Vexeri harvesting facilities. Warren nodded grimly. Relay those coordinates to Tactical. Prepare precision strikes. The Vexeri, confronted with unexpected resistance, changed tactics. 3 of their largest vessels broke formation, accelerating toward the planet's surface. They're going to increase the harvesting rate, Okafor realized, horror in his voice. They're going to take as much as they can before. Not on our watch, Warren cut him off. Thunderhead, to all ships, intercept pattern Theta. We stop those harvesters at all costs. What followed wasn't just a battle. It was humanity's announcement to the galaxy. The Vexari had never encountered a species that fought not for territory or resources, but for the sake of strangers. Their battle algorithms, optimized for efficiency, couldn't predict the human willingness to accept damage to protect the weak. The ERS Valiant, smallest of the human vessels, positioned itself directly in the path of a Vexari harvester, absorbing devastating hits that collapsed its port shields. But even as systems failed across the ship, its weapons remained locked on the harvester's propulsion systems. "We can't move," Captain Diaz of the Valiant reported through static-filled communications. But neither can they. The Thunderhead's cannons fired again, this time targeting the disabled harvester. The Vexari vessel shuddered, secondary explosions cascading along its hull before it went dark. Its descent toward the planet halted. As the battle raged, something unexpected happened on the planet's surface. The Lumari, witnessing the defense of their world by these unknown saviors, began to emerge from hiding. They gathered around the human probes, their bodies glowing with colors never before recorded in human observation. "Captain," Okafor called over the chaos of battle. "The natives. They're doing something with our probes." The bridge crew watched in amazement as the sensor readings clarified. The Lumari weren't just communicating with the probes, they were modifying them, redirecting their energy systems to amplify a signal back to the Vexari ships. "It's some kind of interference pattern," Zhang explained, bewildered. "They're using our technology to disrupt the Vexari harvesting beams." The Vexari command ship, faced with this unexpected development, opened a direct communication channel to the Thunderhead. "CENT or FEORNs," came the message, no longer the impersonal directive of before, but something closer to alarm. "The ERIDUS resources are vital to CONSOSORTIUM survival." "This isn't about resources," Warren responded, her voice transmitting across the void. "These are living beings with their own right to exist. We demand immediate withdrawal of all harvesting operations." There was a pause before the reply came. "ARRELEVANT. The CONSORTIUM requires the HFY Sci-Fi entities for power generation. Without them, multiple VEXARI systems will fail." Understanding dawned on the human command crew. This wasn't simple resource extraction. It was desperation disguised as cold efficiency. The Vexari weren't monsters. They were survivors willing to sacrifice others. "If you need power sources," Warren said, making a decision that would reshape galactic politics, "then we can negotiate trade agreements. Humanity has developed alternative energy technologies, but this harvesting ends today." The battle paused, a fragile silence extending across the void as the Vexari command processed this unexpected offer. It was a uniquely human response, to meet existential threat not just with force, but with problem-solving. "Verification required," came the eventual response. "Stand down your harvesters," Warren insisted. "Allow our teams to land and assess the damage done to this world. We'll demonstrate our technology and discuss terms." The next hour unfolded in tense negotiation, weapons still locked on targets from both sides. But gradually the Vexari harvesters powered down, ascending from the planet's surface. When the first human landing party touched the crystalline soil of Eridus, they were met by hundreds of Lumari, their bodies pulsing with light patterns that their translators were only beginning to decipher. Sorel stood at the front, the ancient scientist who had sent the call that humanity had answered. Commander Elena Santos, leader of the landing party, removed her helmet in the breathable atmosphere, showing her face to the aliens they had come to save. "We heard your call," she said simply, the words translated into light patterns by the modified probes. Sorel's body flashed in what the humans would later learn was the Lumari expression of profound gratitude. But there was something else in the pattern, a question. Why? The translation matrix rendered. Why did you come? Santos looked back at her team, then to the sky where the human ships still maintained their protective formation. She thought of Earth's long, blood-soaked history, of all the times cries for help had gone unanswered, until humanity finally learned its hardest lesson. Because that's what humans do, she said. When we hear someone calling for help, we answer. The aftermath unfolded across weeks that stretched into months. The Vexari, facing their own resource crisis, reluctantly accepted human mediation. Engineers from Earth worked with Lumari scientists to develop energy systems that didn't require harvesting sentient crystalline beings. And the Lumari, recovering from their trauma, began to share their unique perspective on the universe, their light-based technologies opening new avenues of research for humanity. But the most profound impact came in the wider galaxy. News spread through the interstellar communities, stories of the unknown species that had appeared from nowhere to defend strangers, that had faced down a superior force not for gain, but because they had heard a cry for help. In the years that followed, other distress calls would find their way to human receivers, some by accident, others deliberately sent. And each time, humanity would answer. Admiral Nakamura, addressing the expanded Earth Council 5 years after the Eridus intervention, summarized what they had learned. We spent millennia wondering if we were alone in the universe, hoping to find wisdom and guidance from more advanced civilizations. Instead, we discovered that our greatest contribution to the galaxy might be something uniquely human, our instinct to help, our refusal to turn away from suffering, even when it belongs to strangers. On Eridus, a new structure rose from the crystalline plains, a monument created by the Lumari, capturing the moment when the first human ships had appeared in their skies. The crystal formation caught the light in a way that projected the image of a human hand, palm extended, fingers spread in both greeting and protection. Below it, etched in both human language and Lumari light patterns, were the words that had defined humanity's entrance onto the galactic stage. They called for help, and humanity answered.